Hi, and thank you for listening to Milk Tea Mental Health, a podcast where we focus on the systems and structures and how they affect the individual brain. My name is Clarissa Say. I'm a journalist and documentary producer, and today you'll hear me talk to Dr. Associate Professor Anasuya Jegathevi Jegathesan about psychology's weird problem, or to put it in other words, is psychology a white invention? In this episode, you'll hear us talk about what the acronym WEIRD stands for and answer questions like what's abnormal according to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual but is perfectly normal for us Malaysians and Southeast Asians? What is cultural appropriation? And finally, how can clients and mental health practitioners use this knowledge when seeking therapy or in their own practice? Dr. Anasuya is currently the Dean of Psychology and Social Sciences at the University of Cyberjaya. She set up the first NGO-linked counseling center with PT Foundation and worked with 16 photographers to develop Journeys Through Life, a set of images to help people discover and understand better how they feel.
How do you talk about multiculturalism when certain parts of your culture is considered madness?
As long as the therapists themselves are humble and open, because if not, we have a one-way conversation.
When we talk about mental health, there is a tendency to perpetuate that imbalance of power, whereby the power tends to rest a lot more in the hands of the clinician.
Shame is maintained by silence, by the way.
It is a privilege to have you here.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. I think somebody's asked me why I do counseling, and the bottom line is I like people. I like human beings as they are.
Oh.
No, I can't do it. If I didn't like people, you can't be a counselor. It's very hard to be a counselor. Oh, you can be a counselor, but I find it easy because I do like people.
I wonder if it's harder to do what you do because you like people.
I don't think so.
Okay.
For me, it's why I don't mind when somebody calls me because they're desperate at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that has happened a number of times.
Oh wow, you give out your number.
Yeah, yes. Especially when I was in the earlier days. Now not so much, but my number is still out there. So, people do find it. And it's why I don't mind when people approach. But it also means that sometimes I do need time to myself. So I do self-care quite a bit. And when I go hermit mode, I go hermit mode very strongly, just to re-energize myself. But in general, I think people are fascinating and fun and interesting.
I mean, just the fact that you go into hermit mode, that sounds very professional. I would like to know that my therapist is doing almost it's part of the job, right? Taking
Self-care.
care of yourself.
Yes,
yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. And I've gone for my own therapy, and I've had to deal with my own situations and all that. That's part of the job.
All right. So today we are going to talk about WEIRD,
Mm-hmm.
which coined just about over 10 years ago, right? Psychologists and behavioral scientists had the revolutionary idea that maybe not all of us, surprise, surprise, are like, the acronym that I have it stands for Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Developed Nations.
Yep. So this weird concept is basically the idea in psychology. When you look at psychology, where's all the research being done? Who writes the books? Most of the books are written in the West.
Yeah. Even
you have got a good number of psychologists coming out of Europe as well. But in the last, after Freud, after Jung, it was taken over by America. American Psychological Association, American Counseling Association became the huge nomenclature for the world. You do have the British Psychological Association, you do have the British Counseling Association, but they are by far not as famous and not as well known as the American, the American side. To the extent that when you write papers in psychology, it's usually following the APA, American Psychological Association format in terms of bibliography. So what you have for most of the research that has come out, it is about America, about kids in the universities, about young people, teenagers in universities. That has been by far the most group of persons that have been studied are people in universities from white countries. And that means that a lot of the research and a lot of the theories that have come out are for people from that background. Whereas psychology, when you look at psychology, it's about your environment. It's about who brings you up. It's about your parents. And, as Asians, our parents, our environment, our culture is very different from the West.
Yeah.
But yet, all the theories are being superimposed directly onto the East, as if we don't have philosophies, we don't have cultures, we don't have traditions that sometimes are in opposition to what's coming out in the West. So there's a lot of research that has been done where it needs to be Asianized, it needs to be changed. Asian researchers have to do their own research. Asian researchers have to be brave enough to challenge what is in textbooks and basically say, I don't agree with this.
So this is from Leher Singh, who describes imbalances of power and privilege in research collaborations for psychology between high-income countries and low and or middle-income countries, where the authors from the low and middle-income countries end up being excluded despite the fact that they were the ones who originally collected the data.
Correct.
That happens.
That happens a lot.
Okay,
Yeah, that happens
okay.
a lot.
I was surprised to read this.
No, because you're asked to collect data.
Yeah.
But the funding country is their names come out, the main names that come out. Everybody else is left out in IBIT. So you have got these huge projects where the funding country is maybe the US or somebody started in Europe, and then you have collaborators in different universities who are collecting the data from their country, but they are number maybe 10 in the list. So there are like 30 authors altogether, and only the first few names are what you see.
And then you end up being et al.
Yeah, et al. And also, they have been, I have been part of collaborations where they do try to talk down.
Talk down.
Yeah, why do you have this? And I'm like, we have this because this was our idea and this is what we're going to do. But then they expect us to remove it because it's not their idea. And I go, no, we're not removing it. And if I wasn't the kind of person who will say, no, we're not removing it, then their ideas would be pushed forward. And sometimes I'm the only one saying, no, you can't do that.
There's no other pushback.
Not everyone will push back because there is this, let's be polite. Why are you so rude? Why?
Where we end up
it's okay
centering the
lah.
comfort.
Yeah, no need to challenge. It's not, why you want to confront people? It's okay lah. Like whatever happens, as long as the money comes in, whatever can lah. It's not. I won't say it's a tidak apa attitude, but it's a fear that they will stop the funding.
Yeah.
It's a fear that they won't do what we want them to do. So you have this type of clashes, and like I said, I'm happy when it clashes, and I'm a bit less happy when it doesn't clash, and we just go yeah.
And then we end up perpetuating this system. And the reason I brought that up is because, yes, we do want to focus on what unites us, what makes us all human. That's what we've been trying to do. That's, I think, maybe what the field of psychology is. Unfortunately, authors and participant samples in these articles published between 2014 and 2018 in the top 5 APA journals were still predominantly from
America.
Yep, English-speaking and Western countries, which represent only 11% of the world's population.
Correct.
So we're trying to find out what unifies us, and
We're not doing it.
we end up centering white people.
Correct. But let me give you an example. One of the things that is considered ethical is not having dual relationships with clients. All right, for a counselor or a therapist. Now, it's in all the textbooks. It's in APA. It's in ACA. It's in ethics. But here's the thing. In Asian countries, parents would prefer to send their children to a counselor who is from their church, who is from their community. Okay, not church, then their community. They're somebody that they know rather than somebody that they don't know at all.
Right.
People would rather go to a counselor. They may not know them personally, but it's from your community. So you know this person from name. So you'd rather get them, somebody that someone can recommend to you rather than somebody that, I go to the books and I see this person and I'll go to them. Now, if you are Western educated, you may be more comfortable going to a
Complete stranger.
stranger. But for most of us, we don't have that privilege. And furthermore, if you were in a rural setting or you were in a setting where there are not that many counselors and there are not that many therapists, So what's the counselor therapist supposed to do? Not have friends? Not engage with society? Because when you engage in society, you're from that town and you basically know everybody in that town. And they still have to come to you for therapy. So the idea of not having a dual relationship,
It's a very hard line. So my understanding is that the reason that they drew that hard line in the first place was so that the therapist can maintain their therapeutic effectiveness.
yeah, and it's too hard. It's not about having it's not about not having a dual relationship. It's about managing a dual relationship in a way that makes sense, in a way that works, in a way that is not damaging to the clients or to the therapist. So it can be done, but you can't just go and say, oh, you can't have a dual relationship at all. And you're like, not quite true, you can. And sometimes you have to, because they're not enough therapists to go around in certain areas.
I mean,
Of course, you don't go to having a sexual relationship. That's just wrong.
yeah.
But you're talking about friends and knowing people. I think that if it's managed well, and there are so many cases of it and so many examples of it all over the world where it's managed well, including rural Australia, where you have got one counsellor for 3 different towns. So what is a counsellor supposed to do? Not make friends? So you have to know people. You have to, and because you're counselors generally because you like people. You work with people. You're a people person.
I guess 2 questions come to mind. What is the reason that those parents you mentioned people would prefer to seek someone within their community for a therapist, and just
because we actually have multicultural communities, and the culture between communities in Malaysia is so diverse that and parents don't even understand therapy, but at least they understand you're from my culture. Okay, so at least I know you're not going to be going too far out of what we as a family believe. So this is, when you're talking about collectivistic cultures, this is kind of a key role in the collectivistic culture, that, that sense shared of community. You are from my community, so at least I understand you, you understand me. Okay, so you're safe.
there's that trust.
Yes. There's inherent trust, inherent acceptance. Or you're from my school, so you're the school counselor. Okay, so you're from my school, so the school's vetted you, you're safe.
Yeah.
Not random counselor that they've never met from a different group of people. Although sometimes some people prefer counselors from different groups of people. So that's why certain ideas, you can't, you have to move away from a Western version of that idea and look at what suits the population. I do work with death, grief and loss.
Yeah.
And the stages of grief, the 5 stages of grief. It's a system that is absolutely inappropriate. But people still talk about it because it was the first grief theory. But it's a grief theory that was developed by someone doing research in a hospice about how they perceived their own death. I will challenge anybody to transcend the death of their child. You tell me to transcend the death of my mother, I'll tell you you're mad. I will never transcend the death of my mother because I loved my mother and I miss my mother and I still miss my mother. So how can I transcend that? I don't have a mental issue with it. But I have days and times when I have to give respect to her because I miss her. I love her.
And maybe even putting transcendence as the goal.
It's not what we do. We have, and there are researchers that have gone in that direction, which actually is talking about integration rather than transcend, to have continued bonds. Robert Niemeyer, they talk about continued bonds with with people who are deceased, and that is what we have traditionally. Traditionally, we do not have bonds where when somebody dies, you totally forget about them, you move forward, you grieve for a little while and then you move forward. No, you don't do that. You actually have got periods where you're supposed to remember them. You're supposed to honor the memory of them. And that's part of our culture. But now, after 6 months, if you look at the DSM, this is another difference. If you look at the DSM for grief and loss, if you are still grieving after 6 months, you could have complicated grief or you could have grief issue. And I'm like, no, you won't. No, you don't. No, you can't. You can't use that in Asia because for us, you have a 1-year grieving period where in that 1-year grieving period, it is culturally appropriate for you to be grieving. After that grieving period, then you look at other factors.
Why do we need to follow your calendar?
Because that's what the DSM says. That's the Bible.
I guess in a nutshell, what I'm hearing, and this is also coming from my own opinions, is that anything that doesn't conform to this definition of what is normal or what is healthy by what's basically 11% of the world is deemed madness. In 893 articles published in 2015 and 2019 in the top 5 cross-cultural psychology journals, 96.7 participants were from weird countries.
Yes. And here's another part which is not going to be taken very well by some people. Because of the difference with African American and American multicultural issues, when Asians sometimes voice out, it's not accepted.
What do you mean?
Because it is different. We don't have similar kinds of experiences. So we experience things differently. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I went to a conference in America, and I enjoyed it. But there was this section there was a group where it was for colored people of color.
Right.
I'm like,
Okay.
I'm not a person of color. I found it insulting.
Yeah.
I didn't go for the meeting, and then I got asked why I didn't go for the meeting, and I said, well, I thought it was not for me because I don't consider myself a person of color. I consider myself a person.
Yeah.
But that became a talking point. And
It's
then,
almost like a kiddie table person.
yeah, I don't like, and I don't like being called colored. Malaysia has never, there has been issues, between race, we know that. But it's not, in my experience, been directly about the color of my skin, and nobody really turned around and say, oh, outside of joking and being, getting teased, which, that has happened. But in a more professional setting, I've never had it being used as a way to ask people to go to different groups. So I found it rather insulting when I went there. And they found my reaction insulting.
Oh.
Yeah, it was not, they found my reaction, number one, very surprising.
Okay.
And some of them were like, no, but how can you not feel that way? And I'm like, yeah, I don't feel that way. I don't feel that, that it's necessary to make color a big thing. Oh, but it's normal here. Yeah, well, it's normal for you, good for you. Not normal here.
Yeah.
So why is it wrong for it not to be normal here?
Yeah.
That's the part I didn't get. I didn't get why it was wrong for. So when we write, because we leave out, when we write multicultural, we don't really have a white African American narrative in certain journals, then it's not as important.
Because the African American narrative is based in the wider American context. So it makes sense that they would have a different reaction because theirs is.
And also they don't know enough about other cultures, so they don't know what we're writing about, and they don't understand it. They don't understand the nuances. For some of them, they see it all as the same. They literally see it as, but it looks similar. Buddhism and Hinduism, except for the colorful, you got more colorful God. It's just basically similar. Or, Taoism and Buddhism, it's the same one. No, it's not. There are similarities, yes, but culturally, the philosophy may be the same, but culturally, there's a huge difference. And, how people are brought up, it's different. And we recognize it, but, the other may not recognize it as easily. So sometimes it's the nuances, it's not this, it's a different flavor. And people who are used to seeing multicultural issues with this flavor, when they see it missing, then go, oh, okay, this is not so important.
There's something wrong with it.
Yeah, it's not so important. It's not, it mustn't be, I've never seen something like this. It's not that interesting to me, so we shouldn't publish it.
When we do publish to study these individual differences, and this isn't from me, this is from Adeyemi Adetula and colleagues who said most of our international projects to understand our psychological differences almost always test whether effects that were documented in these Western countries
apparent in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that ends up recreating these neocolonial dynamics in which
Yep.
our labor
100%.
ends up going towards generating knowledge which can then benefit those white countries instead of studying, well, what do we see in our cultures that aren't seen in theirs?
Yep. Let's just take. Let me go to one of the fundamental differences. Supernatural.
Yeah.
As an Asian, supernatural is really common. But you talk about ghosts. How can you write about, people being possessed? Those are the times of, that was what used to happen in the times of the Dark Ages. Now we know better. It's all mental health. Everything is mental health. As a professional, if I go out there and I wrote about a few cases which I've had, where I would say was supernaturally sourced and supernaturally solved. That means solved literally with prayer. Okay? Very rare, not common, very rare, but they are cases. I'd be kicked out.
I'd be
ostracized.
You'd lose all credibility.
Yes, exactly. But, these are not belief systems that are limited. These are belief systems of whole societies that are considered madness. The idea of jinns for the Muslims.
Yeah.
For Indians, you have got arul, you have got, certain types of positive possession as well as negative possession. And these are lived experiences. These are experiences of what people have. So how do you talk about multiculturalism when certain parts of your culture is considered
Unscientific.
not even unscientific. I mean, if it's unscientific, that's one thing, but it's considered madness. It's considered, old-fashioned. It's considered is considered just wrong. I work with young people. I do training with young people, in many different ways. So when I have stuff in textbooks and I'm looking at it and going, okay, that's what your textbook says, but I don't believe in it because I wouldn't do this in real life. And there is a clash.
I guess I would ask, is that clash necessarily a bad thing?
No, I don't think so. I think I think that it's basically a good thing because the clash is happening because you have Asian countries that are saying our way is different, and we can work together, but you have to not look down on us. You have to listen to us. So I do think the clash is necessary. I think that Asian voices need to stand up and clash. You need to actually say, wait a second, this may work in this setting, but in this setting it doesn't work. And a lot of researchers will acknowledge that. A lot of researchers in multicultural belief systems and multicultural contexts would acknowledge that, that's fine.
So it's almost kind of problematic that because of our skin, we're being lumped together despite such vastly different lived experiences.
Yeah. So I'm like, nowadays that's becoming more apparent, because of skin color, you get Indians they're more gangsters, but that was not when I was a kid. I didn't experience it when I was a kid. But now I think that would be the reality of many people because that's another learned experience from how the world has evolved. And I'm sorry to say, research is a big part of how the world has evolved. What people talk about, what psychologists talk about in research. And it's created more of a divide than less of a divide. Colonialism changed how, we viewed ourselves. And for the first time, you had Indians, Chinese, Malays being ashamed of being Indians, Chinese, and Malays.
It's almost like I've got like a little white person inside my head.
I want to be white.
Looking out my eyes into the mirror at myself.
Yes.
It's like lens upon lens upon lens.
Yeah. And this is why some of the things that we don't like in university systems, and I'm actually going to give, as much as some of my colleagues will be very unhappy with me, to give a nod to the MQA system, which says that you have to publish in Scopus. Like right now, the university ranking systems say that people have to publish in international journals, Scopus-related journals. And it puts a lot of pressure on lecturers to publish in those journals. But you see, without that pressure, you just publish in local journals or in your own language journals, and it doesn't get out there.
It's almost kind of like
you're speaking into your room.
A spiral.
Yeah, you're speaking just to your room. So the the ranking systems, the fact that now we have to have ranking systems, and because of ranking, you have to publish in more, ranked journals. So you get more cited by people. Your work is more cited by individuals. Then the higher your value is as an academician. Those things are actually important, not because of ranking to me, but because it forces Asians to publish.
Do Asians not publish?
Not as much as I'd like, not as much as I'd like to see, not to the quality I'd like to see. I mean, I'm not a good writer myself. I'm much better at counseling than I am at writing. I'm much better at training than I am at writing, and I have to force myself to write. It's not something that I enjoy, but I have colleagues who enjoy it. I don't enjoy it so much, I will admit. And I'm afraid of writing. I'll admit it to you. I'm afraid of that judgment that comes when you publish and you're sending your paper out there. What if people don't like it? What if they see it as different? This whole Asian thing of face is still there. But I force myself to publish, and I force myself to work with people to publish, because if we don't let ourselves be heard, and not just in our own talking chambers, and not just in our own local areas, our ideas do not live past us. And that's what has happened. Our ideas are not living past us because we are not publishing on a bigger stage. We're not putting our names on a bigger stage. When we were freed from colonialism, there was a continued pseudo-colonialism of the idea that the education of the West was better than the East. China developed exams. China had more experience in developing exams than anybody else. You know that, right?
A much longer history. Yeah.
India has had a long history of education as well. Now, India has had its problems with the education system, but there was an education system in India that where you had Pythagoras theory and all that coming up in India before it came up in the West. But when we learn in textbooks, everything was made by the Western person. That's just not true. You don't see, even in our textbooks, that was the major colonialization of the mind happened in history books. I'm not a fan of going and sitting in the background. I'm not a fan of of students going overseas. And I mean, this is a big issue. I think it's a really big issue. Asian students going overseas and staying in Malaysia House, eating in a Penang cafe, eating local food, and when they come back, they can't even speak proper English. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of, only publishing in your own language. And if you write in your own language, fine. ChatGPT it and translate it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, translation is cheap. Get it translated properly. But push your ideas out there.
At the same time, we don't want to pedestalize their ideas or
we want to
their
challenge.
standards.
Yes. We want to be able to challenge, and we want to have the guts to stand up and say, that may work in this setting, but in other settings it doesn't. And the West will do it themselves. There are people in the West, and this is when it looks like they are selling back our ideas because they are the ones who are willing to fight for it. And that's where I go that you can't demonize somebody who's fighting for your own ideas when they are the only ones fighting. Where are the rest of you all fighting? I hope you don't mind me being controversial. I'm going to bring up a very controversial idea. This idea
I love that. Give me the views.
What's it saying? Cultural appropriation.
Okay.
So cultural appropriation is this idea that you can't go and wear a sari.
Yeah.
So who am I supposed to sell my saris to?
Okay.
I mean, seriously, I'm an Indian.
Yeah.
If you are going to wear a sari, and if you are going to do it respectfully, go ahead. By all means, you want to wear my sari to a wedding? Go ahead. You want to wear a sari to a prom? By all means, I'll give you the best saris that you can buy.
Yeah.
Come and buy. Come and wear. Have more people buy my saris. What's wrong with that? What I see a problem with is only if people make fun of it. When you are saying cultural appropriation, I actually think that it's another way to not let people buy Asian. I think it's another way to stop people from buying, culturally Asian stuff, because you can't wear the stuff. So, we better not wear it. I mean, really? Any Indian I know, I love Chinese people wearing Indian clothes. I love Malay people wearing Indian clothes.
You don't see it as kind of like a symptom not a problem. Like, I wouldn't gatekeep the symptom. I would
Yeah.
go to the root of the problem. But don't you see it as a symptom of exploitation?
Or you could see it as a symptom of Asians not looking at their own culture as something they can sell and whites seeing it as a way to sell it. And then the person that I would blame are the Asians who are not selling it, not the whites.
I don't know if it's a problem with we're not selling our stuff, or is it a problem with we're not buying our stuff?
I
Or
think,
maybe it's both.
No, it's for me, whether we are buying or we are selling, it's not an issue. For me, the issue is you have a whole market of people there who have been sold this idea that them wearing a sari is insulting to me.
I mean, I kind of see that narrative of white people aren't allowed to insert X as a disingenuous take
Yes.
on cultural appropriation.
Not just white.
which-
Any group is not allowed to be disingenuous.
Yeah. Like, I don't think that was the original intention at all in the discussions on cultural appropriation.
Yeah, I think it's all money.
You think?
I
I
think
agree.
it's
No,
all
I
money.
agree. I agree. I do think it's all money, but also it's all money in the sense that so much of our culture is being exported and then re-imported back to us.
So if we are buying
Yes.
exported goods, then we have to look at our values
Yes.
because then we are following a Western culture, which
I
is what
agree.
which is what I fight against. But us exporting to other people
Yeah.
and them not buying
Yeah.
is where I see the issue. But if you take yoga or you take some of the, let's take, I'm going to speak of Hinduism because sometimes you know it a bit better, or I know it a bit better. You have got whites who know more Vedas than locals.
Yeah.
There are white people out there who can say and sing and do Hindu bhajans better than locals. There's one of the best singers of Carnatic music in Malaysia is a Chinese, and he's really good at it. So he is now teaching Indians. Is there anything wrong with that? No, because he's an expert. So for people who have actually gone and learned and respect and learned their expertise, for them to teach locals, even Indians, who have never bothered to learn themselves until they see somebody else from a different color, different background, respecting their culture more than them, then that's something really great.
So there's the distinction between cultural appropriation and cultural
Respect.
appreciation.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, which I think has gotten blurred in the last 20 years.
I agree.
And to the extent where it's a joke. When the higher income countries are convinced that by buying from us and using our things, that they are insulting us, instead of actually appreciating us, because then it blocks the sale. It stops the sale of our goods to that country. And that's a big market. That's money.
It is
And that's
money.
money out of our pockets. Let's take this whole idea of mindfulness. Mindfulness is basically Buddhism.
Yeah.
The idea of Buddhism in textbooks. And they have taken out the religious elements of it.
Which I'm not a fan of.
But it's the only way to get it into secular textbooks.
Yeah.
By removing the religious aspects to get it into secular textbooks. So again, who is now defining mindfulness?
The textbook authors.
Yes. Who are? Predominantly white.
Predominantly, yeah.
And where are the Asian voices? Where are the Asians doing research on mindfulness?
They are getting accreditation from those authors.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah, no, me neither.
Yeah. So that's
but
why
it almost becomes kind of like a snake eating its tail, because in order for me to gain credibility, I need to get like a certificate or like some
that's
kind
why
of paper.
that's why sometimes I'm like, why are we chasing so many certs? Create your own. I have my own. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not very good at selling. But I have my own. That's where the cards and all come from. I have my own therapeutic modality. But I'm not good at selling. I'm just not. So I know my limitations, so I'm fine with it. But I do my own thing. I'm not scared to say I do my own thing. I'm not scared to say I have my own therapeutic modality, and I will fight you. I will stand up for it, and I'll talk about it. Yes, I use other modalities as well, but I have my own therapeutic modality as well, which I do use. And it's the backbone of what I do. Buddhism is a really good example of how the people who look at how to apply it outside our culture,
Yeah.
but just take the strengths of it,
Yeah.
were the white people. They
Yes.
did that.
Yeah.
Now, like it, don't like it, that's what has happened. Now, how do Asians then reclaim it? Because the thing about mindfulness is it works.
It does.
It is 100%. It works, and it's the Dalai Lama has been the only religious figure ever invited into APA because they did an experiment on Tibetan Buddhism style, and it was shown that without any of the spiritual aspects, if people just followed the steps in the Tibetan Buddhism meditation, it actively significantly brought down anxiety, stress, and depression. So, just following that meditation style, it was proven to do it, not just once, but by people who didn't know what they were doing, just people just telling people to follow these steps.
Yeah.
So you take away the spiritual aspects and the guru aspects and the leader aspects, and it still works. So that's where the strength of why mindfulness became so strong in the textbooks actually came from research done in this area.
Yeah, they saw the value in it.
Yeah.
They measured it. They tested it.
Yep, and they showed it.
And then they structured, packaged, and I would take a step further and say commodified it.
Correct.
And then,
So now to turn that commodity back into our commodity is the question. Is that, do we need to chase that paper?
for me, like everything goes back to capitalism because
It does.
yeah, it really does. Because the reason that the mindfulness as sold by these nations in the global north works is because, well, what is the end goal of all of that research and all of those testing? It's so you can be more productive.
Yep.
It's so you can be more functional. And by removing the religious aspect, that the original end goal has completely shifted,
Yeah.
which is how do we be present with one another?
Correct.
But that's not sexy. That's not marketable.
Very hard. And because we don't think of our religions or our culture as marketable. We don't commodify our own culture and religion. We don't see how we can make our culture something we can make money out of. Very rare. Most of us don't.
I find it very hard, yeah.
But, the West can, because that's their style. So, like it, don't like it, I see where it's coming from. I just say that sometimes we have to be able, and if we see them, if we are following, fair enough, But I genuinely do not believe that we need handouts. I genuinely believe that we need to stand up and we need to make our voices heard, and that's why I agreed to the topic. I said, because I'm just sharing my opinion on this, and it is my opinion. I may be wrong, I'll totally admit to it. It's my experiences with and other people may have had totally different experiences. And I've had very good experiences in collaboration with people.
Yeah.
Some of my
It's not all
best
bad.
trainers were whites.
Yeah.
But I only spoke about the few bad ones just now to highlight the problems in this idea of the experience of Western nations being lock, stock, barrel imposed on the East, and then when papers that we write, not having that same kind of bite because we don't have that kind of experience. And I have always argued that the real multicultural experts are Asians.
Yeah.
Especially Southeast Asians.
Yeah.
Why especially Southeast Asians? Malaysia, Singapore. Because every interaction that we have every day is with another group of people.
And not
Different
in a binary
color,
way.
Not in a binary, in a very mixed way. I've traveled to some other countries, like even other Asian countries. They're not like Malaysia, they're not like Singapore. You can go around and see, like if you go to Hong Kong, you mainly see Chinese, unless you go to certain areas.
Yeah.
Okay, but in Hong Kong, predominantly, I sit there, I'll see mostly Chinese walking around. Okay, you go to the Maldives, you see mostly Maldivians walking around, unless you go to the tourist areas. You go to India, you see mostly Indians. They all look the same. They could be different religion, they could be different culture, but they look the same. But you come to Malaysia, we all look different. We are different. We speak different languages. We have one language. We have Malay, we have English, but we all speak a third or fourth language. And we are so good at it. Honestly, I think that we don't recognize how much of an expert Asians are, Malaysian and especially Malaysian and Singaporean, at multicultural issues. But how many papers are led by Malaysian and
Studying these
Ooh.
things. Yeah.
when you do therapy?
Yeah.
And you always have to do therapy from the client's perspective, not
Yeah.
your perspective. Oh, but your clients come from different religions. Yes. You still do it from their perspective.
Yeah.
How? By respecting their perspective. That's all. You respect their perspective, you let them lead. You let them lead, no issues.
That was going to be like my last question to wrap all of this up, which is like knowing all of what we know now for any clients, therapists, client/therapists. We are not just one role. What can they do when going into therapy?
Shop around.
Shop around.
Find therapists that match what you need as a client. Do not go to a therapist and then if you don't like the therapist, still continue with the therapist because, everybody says they're good. The critical thing in therapy is the therapeutic relationship between the therapist and the client.
Yeah.
So clients nowadays, last time you couldn't do it because there are not enough therapists out there. But nowadays we do have a lot of counselors.
Yeah.
There's a lot of universities, there's a lot of programs. Just make sure they are members of PEKAMA, they are Lembaga Council Malaysia.
Yeah.
There are a few con artists out there, so you need to be careful. But they are legitimate counselors. Just you can check with the Malaysian Clinical Psychology Association for MSCP for clinical psychologists, Lembaga Council of Malaysia, the Board of Counselling for Malaysia, to make sure the people have got the qualifications to be a counsellor. And by all means, shop around, find counsellors that suit you and go to them. Just make sure they have the proper qualifications for what they're saying. And for counsellors, when you all are practicing, when you're practicing with a client, that respect. So when I'm dealing with a client, I bring that strength of what I learned from when I was a child in Malaysia to respect another religion and say, you pray in your religion, I will sit here and be respectful. But you pray in front of me, no problems. And if you allow clients to do that, then spirituality becomes the fourth leg of mental health.
Yeah.
And it's a very strong leg. People's belief systems can be very powerful in helping them recover, in helping them heal, if you are respectful and you allow it to come into the conversation, because they were therapists who were atheists.
I like a lot that you use the word respect. For two reasons. Number one, too often personal experience and also anecdotal from people in my life where they go into therapy and the therapist is, I know what's up. I know what's up with you. I know what's up. Like, I know what you need. I know what you need to do. And, that can impair the
definitely.
therapeutic alliance.
Yeah.
And the word respect is just interesting to me. I don't know if you've heard about this. I saw it online somewhere. It's been shared around a lot. Some people use the word respect to mean respect me as an authority, and some people use the word respect to mean respect me as a person. And when some people say, if you don't respect me, I won't respect you, what they mean is, if you don't respect me as an authority, I won't respect you as a person. Would you go so far as to say that therapists can, I don't like the word should, but therapists can also see their clients as an authority on their experience?
Oh, I'm going to say should.
Yeah.
I'm not, in fact, I'll go there. I'm actually going to go must.
Must.
Yeah, a therapist must see their clients as an authority on their experience, because that's their experience. You are just having an insight into their world.
Yeah.
That insight into their world may be based on patterns of behavior. Now, I have got good insight. I do insight-based therapy. That's my therapeutic modality. And I can see patterns of behavior. I'm pretty good at predicting what's the outcome because of your presenting behavior.
Yes.
But you are the expert in your presenting behavior. And if you decide I'm wrong, tomorrow you won't do what I say. It will be something totally different. My prediction will be totally wrong because you have made that choice to not follow a pattern of behavior. but you are coming to me as a client.
Yeah.
And I have to respect the fact that you are an independent human being who can heal. You
Yeah.
just need a bit of support.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not the one healing you. I don't heal people. People heal themselves. I support people in their healing, but I don't heal them. I don't have that power.
We don't want a case where we end up almost replicating the dynamics that we talked about from
No, you don't. Yeah.
areas of authority and power onto countries of lower income.
So you don't want the therapist imposing their belief system on clients and telling clients what to think because they know better than the client. But that does happen. That does happen where where therapists look down on clients, where therapists are condescending, where therapists impose belief systems. And anytime a client sees those things, please change therapist. Find somebody else.
I hate therapist shopping. It's so much work. I've done it. I've had to do it.
Yeah, but the alternative is getting a therapist who is telling you how to live your life. And if that works for you, then go ahead.
Yeah.
If you're the kind who likes to have people tell you what to do, and no shade, I'm not throwing shade here, but there are individuals who like it very structured,
Yeah.
who like to be, given clear instructions. And if that works for you, by all means, there are therapists out there who are like that.
Yeah.
And then there are therapists who are supportive. There are so many kinds.
Again, we're all different.
Yeah. So choose your style.
Yeah.
There's no one style.
Personally, for me, and I know not everyone's like this, but I really dislike it when my therapist, even though they're right about my patterns of behavior, start to step over the line and tell me what my intentions are or what my thoughts are or who I am. And that's when I start to find myself getting prickly and defensive. Like, what's going through your mind?
What do
as
you
hear this?
say? What do you say? How do they say who you are? That's an interesting thing.
Okay, so concrete example. So what was happening was the therapist told me, it's because you're always looking for the big intellectual highs, and you're not willing to sit through the mundane stuff. And I found myself getting prickly and defensive, even though on one level they were right, but on another level, I almost felt like there was this intrusion onto my intentions and my motivations. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you see, the point is for you to be aware of that. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Whether you agree or disagree, that's your choice.
Okay.
But when you do point out a pattern in behavior.
Yeah.
But me pointing out a pattern in behavior is me getting an insight that will make you uncomfortable because that's our job. Am I right?
I would have liked a little bit of humility in that statement.
No, I would have said
that
it's
made-
and usually my statements are okay. Like, correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, but from my observation, what I see is that you have this tendency. Is that right?
Okay.
Would you accept that statement?
That would have sat really well with
Correct.
me. Yeah.
Now, this is what I teach students to do because sometimes they don't realize how arrogant they sound when they tell people what they're feeling. So you don't tell someone, you suggest that I have observed or I've seen this is what you're feeling. Is this true? Because it gives the power to you and it puts me in the position of observer, which is what I'm doing, which is my job. And then when you think about it, you are able to agree or disagree with me and say, no, your observation is wrong because, this is only a temporary thing. I've never actually done it before, but I was under a lot of stress at that point in time. All right, granted. So yeah, I was wrong. Oh no, you were actually wrong because my intention was different. I was just copying what I saw somebody else do. It was not me. No problem. Oh yeah, actually, maybe you're right. Maybe. So that it gives you that power.
It's a very fine balance.
It's not to me. To me, it's
Not to
very
you.
clear. No, to me
Okay.
as a trainer, it's really clear.
Okay.
It's not a fine balance.
Tell me more.
A therapist needs to know that it is really clear that I am giving a client my observation and an option to opt out or to agree or disagree rather than saying, I am describing you full stop.
Okay.
I'm not a, you're not a tukang, you're not somebody sitting down there with a magic ball saying, this is what you are doing in your life. No, you are observing and you're pointing out observations and you're pointing out in a tentative way so clients can reject it, because ultimately, for me, the major goal of therapy is not to make you happy.
No.
It's to give you power.
Yes.
It's to empower you in your own life, because life circumstances have disempowered people. And whether that empowerment comes from connections, whether the empowerment comes from, changing lifestyles, whether the empowerment comes from doing something different, or for doing the same thing but without guilt, giving up the guilt, that power is the client's power.
Yeah.
But my job is to empower you, and I cannot empower you if I'm telling you what to do. Your job is not to
Come up with clever insights.
Yeah. That's my job as a lecturer. So when I'm a lecturer, I wear that hat.
Yeah.
But when I'm a counselor, I don't. Because I don't know your life. I only know what is observed. So I can only see this slice. So I have to keep changing my perspective until we have one that clicks. Or we have one that clicks, but no, you cannot be right, so I'm going to prove you wrong. I love that.
Give them a little bit of fire.
Yeah, yes, it works, especially with teenagers. It does work. Go ahead.
So just to do a self-check, from your perspective, how Western-centric do you think this conversation is? Were there any points that I failed to notice or assumptions that haven't gone checked yet?
No, I don't. From what perspective this conversation is, I have no idea. We went everywhere. We talked about history. We talked about culture. We talked about. The only thing we didn't talk about was sports. I think we basically
we did that
covered
before the
everything.
interview.
Things, yeah, and then we didn't quite cover politics as well. Thank God.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I don't think this was Western centric. I think this was pretty much an open conversation. There are differing points of view, and and some things we agreed, and some things we don't quite agree on, which is fine.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure
Yeah,
having
thank
this
you.
conversation
Yeah.
with you.
It went everywhere. I was like, okay. Yeah. I hope you're okay with editing it. God, it's going to be murder.
That was our first episode of Milk Tea Mental Health. Weird. Is psychology a white invention? With Dr. Anasuya Jegathevi Jegathesan. Thank you so much for listening. Please let us know what you think, if you disagreed or agreed with some of the points here, and what this episode means for you. If this is the sort of thing you're into, you can connect with us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Look for Milk Tea Mental Health, and I look forward to seeing you there.